Next, though, we're going to dive into Best Production here. So the acts that are nominated for this, it's Mastodon, Holding Absence, Gojira, Bullet for My Valentine, Spiritbox, Trivium, and While She Sleeps. So again, some very familiar names. A lot of artists are nominated for multiple categories. Downey, who would you love to see win this one, and who do you think will win this one?
Well, first and foremost, I love that this is a category because I think that this is not so much a lost art, but maybe just absent from the conversation these days. There's a lot of artists making what traditional producers like to call bedroom records, where it's, somebody with a laptop and it's all programmed drums and everything's sampled and everything's snapped to a grid. And that's not to say that you can't create awesome records that way, because it's definitely been done. And a lot of times it's genre dependent, but for a big heavy rock record, I mean, there are still these folks out there, Andy Sneap, Josh Wilbur, Zeus, Dan Corniff, Wizard Bold, is that what he calls himself? I never know how to say it. I don't know how to spell it. Who are just like crushing it from a production standpoint and getting great performances and so on. So I love that this is even a category. Speaking of Josh Wilbur, he, has worked a bunch with Trivium in the past. Lamb of God always goes to him. He mixed the most recent Korn record. He's great. He gets great performances out of bands. His mixes are slamming. I think that Trivium record sounds amazing. Definitely shout outs to Gojira and Spiritbox, who both have producers within the bands who are in there. Shout out to Carl Brown, who produced the Bullet record and co-produced While She Sleeps. So Carl Brown's there with a double nomination. Having said all of that, I gotta say Mastodon, Hushed and Grim sounds the best to me.
And I feel like Stay Puft's agreeing from that reaction.
We'll get to it. We'll get to it. Yeah, we'll get to it.
Yeah, as far as who will win, unfortunately, I'm not. I wish I was more confident in the robustness of the collective knowledge out there in our community about who these producers are and what each of them brings to these records. I'm not all that confident that the category won't be one more based by name recognition for each particular band. Right. So in that case, I really don't know. No idea who's going to win.
Yeah, I don't either. And so like making this a choice on this is really hard, because like that Holding Absence record also sounded really, really, really good. I'm not really the target audience, I feel, for that sound of that band, but I found myself going back to that album a lot just because of the emotions in it and how it kind of makes you feel stuff, and it also just like sounded really, really good. The reason that I asked out or like kind of like reacted Downey is because I thought that you're gonna say that Mastodon is a little bit of an afterthought with how we were going, and like I agree, just that I know it was a long record, but given the like emotional weight behind it about how the record was pretty much all about their own band manager that passed away a few years ago, they just like transport you into this world from the very first note and keep you there all of the way through. And the record sounds great, as the Mastodon record does and should. And I know that they record it in Bill's basement studio and everything like that, and they've really refined their work on that. So I would say, like, for me, that's, again, coin flip between this one and then gotta shout out again Spiritbox, because I know that they, Mike Stringer is, in the band and does a lot of that stuff, but I think that's one of the reasons why they got such a following, several years ago when nobody really knew who they were. It's just because their songs sounded fucking good. They sound really, really good. And from the very intro to Sunkiller all the way through with the little, tricks and effects and the work that they put into like their guitar tone and the vocal tone and everything in there, you want to go back to that record again and again just so that you can put your headphones on and find the little things that they've done in that record. And I think that that's a mark of a masterfully produced record. So yeah, shout out to Holding Absence and Trivium. I don't know, flip a coin between Mastodon and Spiritbox, really, because I personally like loved the Mastodon album and have listened to it probably a bit more than I have the Spiritbox album, but I also really like the Spiritbox album, has listened to it a bunch. So I don't know. Pick one, everybody. Flip a coin.
And before we jump off of Mastodon, I want to mention also that particular producer, David Bottrell. If you look at his if you look at his discography,
I instantly recognize the name when you say it.
Yeah, exactly, because you've seen it in the liner notes for a bunch of Tool records, Muse, Peter Gabriel stuff back in the 80s and early 90s, King Crimson, Between the Buried and Me, Circa Survive, obviously Mastodon now added to that, Knotfest's own Stone Sour, Placebo, one of my favorite rock bands. We just put out a new record. And a huge eternal shout out to the late, great Nick John, who was a good friend of mine for a number of years, somebody I had a tremendous respect for. He and I and Gloria Cavalera, we all co-managed the band Killer Be Killed together for 2 album cycles. So I got the opportunity to get to know Nick as a colleague, and once upon a time was talking to him every other day for several months. So a tremendous loss to our community, and it's been really powerful and really rad to see how much Mastodon has kept his memory alive and made a whole record about him. So
cheers.
Yes. And then Cori, where are you?
Oh yeah, definitely. So I agree with both of you. I also agree that I really like seeing this category, because while this time it may be based a lot on name recognition of the bands, next time it may not be, because this is actually getting the conversation going to where people are actually paying attention to production again and not treating it like it's an afterthought. And I also agree that I would like to see the Mastodon record win. Everything in that album's production feels very intentional, thought out, but also natural. It doesn't feel overdone. It doesn't feel overproduced. It doesn't feel like they tried to make it too perfect, or, it doesn't feel hokey. It just feels right when you listen to it. This is how it should be. This is the natural state of these songs. And that is what really stood out to me about that album, is because sometimes people, they take away the emotional intensity of an album by trying to make it too perfect and make the production too clean or too just overdone. And they did not do that on this one. They allowed each instrument to be its own. They allowed the vocals to really shine. And it just feels very, very complete and well done.
I could not agree more. And I think that's so crucial, is that balance between, because the tools and means of production have allowed us to make things more perfect, which is not a bad thing in and of itself. But to me, I kind of liken it to movies where, computer effects versus practical effects. It's like, well, if the digital stuff is there to kind of enhance what's already being captured in camera, cool. I'm not so into a movie where the whole thing just looks like a video game. And my attitude towards production is really similar, where it doesn't have to be like super raw analog. Somebody's guitar's out of tune. Nobody had a click track, so it's all sloppy. It doesn't have to be that, but also the other end of that spectrum where everything's so perfect it sounds like an AI program made it.
It starts to feel sterile, like a hospital or something like that. And that's not what you want with music. You want that emotional connection.
Absolutely.
It's interesting, because when I saw it was for best production on a record, I mean, I've never really listened to an album and thought of it in terms of a production stance, simply because for me it's always how it makes me feel. And then hearing all you talk about, I mean, it goes hand in hand. It really, one completely reacts off of the other. So if I'm simply just going off of the album that I loved from start to finish, the one that I felt was the most flawless in between, I would have to agree with Mastodon, but I also really did like the Bullet record a lot. So I'm completely content with either of those winning. But then again, all of these are really good albums, so I feel like I listened through to all of them and I'd be fine with any of them taking it home. So I guess, like I said, with the other categories, we will have to see which one gets that W.